Moving over right now, South Asia, that was once considered India's backyard, now has to deal with increasing Chinese influence from Islamabad to Colombo to Dhaka to Kathmandu. China, it seems, is here to stay in South Asia. WION's correspondent in Nepal, Siddhant Sibbal, brings you a special report from Kathmandu, how things have changed on the ground in Kathmandu.
When in Rome, do as the Romans do, goes a saying. But if China has its way, when in Kathmandu, do as the Chinese do. China is increasing its influence in the whole of South Asia, from the Maldives to Nepal. Just walk around the bazaars of Kathmandu and one can't miss noticing China's presence. Its omnipresence across the city. From signboards to Chinese tourists, to businesses, to hotels. Go to shops and you will find many of them being owned by Chinese. Chinese currency changers are everywhere.
Tourists तो world के आते हैं, लेकिन ज़्यादा dependent अब Chinese पे हुआ. बीच में लेकिन जो बुनचाल हुआ था इधर से बहुत फर्क आ गया, लगभग 70% कम आ रहे हैं अब Chinese. क्योंकि रोड से आते थे बहुत सारे, प्लेन से सब नहीं आ सकते हैं, तो रोड तो बंद हो गया, पहाड़ वाड़ गिर गए, तो उससे फर्क हो गया.
China has quietly flooded Kathmandu.
There seems to be a growing influence of China here in Kathmandu. I'm standing in the Thamel area of Kathmandu, which is the business district of this city. There are over 200 Chinese shops and hotels in this place itself. And you can even get a China SIM if you're flying to China from Nepal. And the influence is so much that even the signboards are here are in English and in Chinese.
Tourism, which forms an essential part of Nepal's economy, has a major Chinese role today. China is the second largest source of foreign tourists to Nepal. Over 100,000 Chinese tourists visit Nepal annually. But it's difficult to start a conversation when they don't know English and you don't know Chinese.
Travel, tourist.
Sorry.
Okay, you want to go.
A walk through the markets explains how China is here to stay.
Before it was very nice. After the earthquake and blockade, there are no more tourists. Before, there are lots of tourists anytime, no any off-season. Nowadays, during the season also no more tourists, very few. Usually are here, normally. Lots of them have their own business in here.
80% of the signs in the tourists' guide shops are in Mandarin. The government of Nepal had waived visa fees for Chinese tourists since January 2016. So what is making China-Nepal ties grow stronger? Nepali journalist Jubaraj Jimiri believes the ties haven't been impacted by any issues.
Nepal-China relations, diplomatic relations, are more than six decades old now. And there have rarely been any misunderstanding. One, the scale of, diplomatic relation was not that, massive. Two, Nepal and China didn't have much bigger problems. Even the boundary disputes they sorted out, whereas it's not been sorted out in India. Third, China adopted a very realistic approach in the sense that it always advised Nepalese that China cannot substitute India in Nepal.
Even as India-Nepal ties hit a low, China was making rapid progress with Kathmandu. In recent years, China has emerged as one of the largest FDI contributors to Nepal. The economic engagement between the world's second largest economy and the Himalayan country has kept on growing.
There's a growing influence of China in Kathmandu and rest of Nepal. China has even proposed a connectivity plan that connects China, Nepal and India. But India has said that it would rather pursue its own connectivity plans with Nepal. Clearly, China is the elephant in the room, and the growing Chinese influence in Kathmandu worries New Delhi. With video journalist Neeraj Patel, Siddhant Sibal from Kathmandu for WION.
And we are also joined in by our correspondent Siddhant Sibal, who is reporting live from Kathmandu. Let's quickly go back to Siddhant. Siddhant, how important is it at this point to convince Nepal Prime Minister Oli, who had earlier also made it amply clear that they do not mind, Chinese presence as long as they deliver upon their promises? So clearly, even though he's back in power for a second time, how important is it for India and Prime Minister Modi to convince Prime Minister Oli from Nepal?
Well, after 10 years of instability, civil war, earthquake, blockade, India and Nepal are re-engaging with each other. And Prime Minister Oli has a stable mandate. He has a strong mandate, and he is a Prime Minister who wants to deliver on his promises. He wants to work for the people of Nepal, electrify all the villages. He has a slogan also of Happy Nepali. And for this, he also wants to leverage diplomacy for the domestic needs, just as the Indian Prime Minister is doing. There are a lot of similarities, of course, between Indian Prime Minister's policies and the Prime Minister of Nepal. I've already mentioned you, but he is a Prime Minister who is keen to engage not only with India, he's keen to engage with China. He was the Prime Minister who signed a trade and transit agreement with China. He was the Prime Minister who has been discussing about a railway line from China to Nepal. So clearly he is open about it. The Foreign Minister told us that Nepal wants to have an independent foreign policy, which of course means that they want to pursue their independent relationship not only with India but with China as well. They only have two neighbors, relationship primarily because of the geographical position. They want a port also because this is a landlocked country, and for that the Prime Minister of Nepal, Prime Minister Oli, is willing to go to any length, and that is why India needs to convey that India is there to help Prime Minister Oli in its own domestic needs in every which way, and for that connectivity forms an essential component. And as we speak, a lot of events have taken place at the podium where the Prime Minister of India with other dignitaries are present, including a symbolic key being given, a symbolic key of the Janakpur city being given to the Prime Minister of India, a garland also being given to the Prime Minister of India. It's 121 kg garland, marigold garland, which is being given a pretty heavy garland, but focusing on the visit. This event, which is right now taking place in Janakpur, will be about bridging the trust deficit between India and Nepal. The Prime Minister of India will be talking about his thoughts about India-Nepal relation directly with the people of Nepal, because people of Nepal today have a mixed view about India. They have the fresh memories. The memories of the blockade are still fresh in the mind of the people, because they really suffered, especially in the background of the earthquake, because they were struck by an earthquake just 6 months before that unofficial blockade that happened. And that is why image of India needs to be improved, and that is why this visit is really important, not only for India but for Nepal, because India wants to re-engage, and that is why special focus is being given on faith diplomacy, because that is something that's common for both India and for Nepal. A lot of tourists, I've already mentioned you, even the Prime Minister of India mentioned during his statement at the flagging off of bus service at Janki Devi temple between Janakpur and the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh in Ayodhya, where Ayodhya is situated.
Right. As we earlier mentioned, Siddhant, that this is faith diplomacy at its best, and let's hope that faith diplomacy actually helps in facilitating greater, renewed ties, better ties between India and Nepal. And it's important to tell our viewers at the moment that the Prime Minister is wearing a Maithili kurta gifted to him by KP Sharma Oli, Nepal's Prime Minister. And this is how special the ties seem to be at the moment between India and Nepal, as Prime Minister Modi is wearing a Maithili kurta gifted to him by KP Sharma Oli. And of course, it's interesting to note that faith diplomacy is what has kicked off Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Nepal.
Yes, rightly said, as you mentioned, the Prime Minister is wearing a kurta gifted by the Prime Minister of Nepal in Janakpur, and that is that speaks a lot about symbolism, because this visit is about, if it's about hard diplomacy, it's also about soft diplomacy, about the religious connect between India and Nepal. And this kurta, obviously, it sends out a message of camaraderie between Kathmandu and New Delhi. Though the relationship between Kathmandu and New Delhi might be low sometimes, might be high sometimes, but it's the people-to-people contact that has been leading this relationship, because we have a long porous border where you can just move around without any visa, without any restriction. There are a lot of Indians here working in Kathmandu. We met many of them, especially from the Indian state of Bihar, working here. There's a relationship, it's called Roti Beti Ka Rishta. It's called food and family relationship that is driving this relationship. So that, of course, is focused. This visit is if it's about symbolism, it's also about follow-up. It's also about re-engaging with a country which India considers as an ally, as an all-weather friend, and that is why this visit will help India in repositioning itself and changing its perception, especially in the mind of the common Nepali on the ground, who has a mixed image about India today.
Also, Siddhant, it's very important to establish the religious and historical significance of Janakpur, where Prime Minister Modi is actually present at the moment and is all set to address a public gathering over there. Janakpur also happens to be an important religious center for all the Nepalese people over there. And let's talk about the religious and historical significance of Janakpur.
Well, Janakpur is a place that is connected with the people of India and, of course, people of Nepal, primarily because it's considered as the birthplace of Devi Sita, who was the wife of Lord Ram, and that is why it's really important. But the most important, the center of attraction is the Janki Devi temple, where the Indian Prime Minister was present just a few hours ago, just 1 hour ago, and this temple basically is now connected to the Indian city of Ayodhya. It's obviously it's a historical temple, a temple that is a site of pilgrimage for many Indians, and in 1657 a gold statue of goddess Sita was found at the very spot, and Sita is said to have lived there. Legend has it it's not only a holy site, but a lot of historical stuff was found in that area, at that location where that temple is situated today.
Right. Siddhant, we'll continue to stay on this story, but also it's important to mention that in the last 10 years, Nepal has undergone major political crisis, a destructive earthquake and a negative impact of demonetization. For Nepal, everything changed in April 2015 when a massive earthquake struck the country. It was the worst earthquake in Nepal since 1934. 9,000 people lost their lives and hundreds of thousands of Nepalese were rendered homeless.
Since back then, the incident of earthquake, mostly the tourists are, they are in a declining term. In the context of Kathmandu, they are just declining in some type of ratio to if before the earthquake it was like 100%, then it has been declined up to 30%. Only up to 60 to 70% of tourists are coming here. So that has been affecting the tourism board of Nepal.
See, after earthquake, we have very good government, and after earthquake, the foreign countries peoples are not coming so much in Nepal. A neighborhood country like India and Chinese people are coming. We lost our historical place, we lost property of our country. So after earthquake, our country is gradually progressing.
If we see on all over Nepal, there is recovery is very slow because government is not providing sufficient efficiency on those areas, because in remote areas there is a lack of materials and the lack of money. They cannot build their homes still in this condition.
Under the Neighbourhood First policy, India has been providing help to Nepal. India launched Operation Maitri to help Nepal after the earthquake. India swiftly dispatched National Disaster Response Force teams and special aircrafts with rescue and relief materials to Nepal. WION's Siddhant Sibal brings you more.
I'm standing at the historic Darbar Square that was completely flattened when the 2015 earthquake struck Nepal. Many people were killed, and since then Nepal is recovering, and it is recovering successfully. Nepal did suffer a series of misfortunate events in last 10 years, the civil war, the earthquake, the political crisis, but Nepal is recovering as a strong nation, particularly after a stable government being formed here in Kathmandu after elections. This shows the resilience of not only Nepal as a country, but of the common people of Nepal who have survived the entire series of misfortunate events and come back as a stronger group of people. With video journalist Neeraj Patel, Siddhant Sibal for WION in Kathmandu.